Exactly. So, hello everyone. It is so nice to see your faces online again in these spaces that help us keep connected. And today's topic is burnout and beyond. And we will be applying this live Q&A format for today's session on your staff well-being challenges, as we indicated in the title of the session. And it will be moderated by Lindy Wee, who's the project associate for the Care for Caregivers Plus project at the RCT. So she will be posing some questions to our panelists. And these are questions that have already been asked, compiled in advance through the form that was circulated with all of you. And then at the end, we will have an open discussion. And we highly encourage you all to participate and share your experiences, questions, reflections, as always. And as always, I want to mention that we have a simultaneous interpretation available. So remember that you need to be on the right channel. So make sure you click on this language, glove icon, which appears on the bottom bar with this glove icon. Make sure that you're on the English, French, or Spanish channel to get the interpretation through. So yeah, and with that, I will first give the floor to Lisa Henry, RCT's Secretary General, for some opening remarks, and then we will move on to Lindy Wee, who will moderate today's session. So Lisa,
Excellent.
Linsa.
A good combination of both names. Thank you very much, Bassa, and great introduction. And good day, good morning, good afternoon to all of you on the call. We're always happy to see so many people from across the world with us, and especially for this particular topic, right? Burnout and beyond. In fact, how to prevent burnout is what we're talking about here. We know that this space is important to you because there's been a huge response on sending us questions that you want answered for this webinar today. And beyond that, we know that it's one of the important parts of rehabilitation and working with staff because it's part of our global standards on rehabilitation. We have standard 11, which refers to staff safety. We have standard 12, talking about care for staff. And in both of these standards, you will find that there's an attention placed on how staff are being taken care of, how they are safe, secure, and cared for, how they have the means to actually be resilient in the face of the work they're doing, how can they be healthy in the work they're doing, and how can we prevent vicarious trauma and burnout as an organizational priority. So across the broad membership of IRCT, which is growing every day, these two standards are what we are focusing on in this webinar today. You may also know that the month of October is the World Mental Health, has the World Mental Health Day, and there's a focus in this month on mental health. And we know, and therefore are focusing on it ourselves, that in earlier webinars on this topic, we've had psychological experts coming online to tell you about different terminology, definitions, to understand and unpack this idea of vicarious trauma or burnout and prevention of that, and what to do about it organizationally. But today the methodology is going to be a bit different. So prior webinars have given you tools. Today it's answering the direct questions. And we have these three experts on call with us and on the panel today. And we have our program manager here at ICT, Lindy Wee, who's come to us from a Tree of Life, Zimbabwe, and is now working in the secretariat here, and she is the manager of this program. So we now have 15 different grants functioning where the prioritization of those grants is care for caregivers. So with those words, really happy that you prioritized it. You showed up today for this webinar, and I hand over to Lindy Wee. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you for those of you who used the anonymous form to submit questions already. So like Lisa said, the format of the webinar today will be questions and answers, which we'll dive right into. But first, I'll introduce our panel for today. We have Carmen Hamady. Carmen is a clinical psychologist who consults with IRCT member center Restart, which is located in Lebanon. Restart provides center-based, community-based, and detention-based rehabilitation services to victims of torture. We have Kanayo Olisa-Metuh. Kanayo is a human rights advocate and executive director of Legend Golden Care Foundation, which is an IRCT member center based in Nigeria. Legend Golden Care Foundation offers pro bono legal services to indigent pretrial detainees, supporting survivors of torture and sexual and gender-based violence, which also while also championing the welfare and rehabilitation of inmates in correctional facilities. And then finally, we have Léonce Byimana. Léonce is a clinical psychologist and the director of U.S. clinical programs at the Center for Victims of Torture in the United States of America, and he is a refugee mental health and human rights specialist. The Center for Victims of Torture is a nonprofit organization that provides rehabilitative care and mental health services to survivors of torture, many of whom are refugees or asylum seekers. So, we will dive right into it with the questions that have been submitted. This is not to say that you cannot raise your hand to ask a question or to ask for clarification or to ask a follow-up question. In fact, we really want this to be interactive. So yes, at any time, feel free to raise a hand or just speak up. I'll start with a question for Kanayo. The question says, my boss says if staff need staff care, it is because we are weak. He doesn't want to hear the word self-care and has said that there are many unemployed people that can take our jobs if we complain. What can I do about this?
So when you have a boss who has a dismissive attitude towards staff care, it's a really difficult one to navigate, to be honest. And the first thing I'd suggest is that you get an ally or two, probably in the HR department, and get their buy-in. And once you're able to do that, one other thing I think you should do is maybe tweak your language a bit. For somebody who says self-care, who's averse to the term self-care, probably in his mind, it's just the staff benefiting from it. Maybe you want to come from a place of, something that helps performance of the staff or activities that help productivity. I think that if you present it that way, that boss that seems to be dismissive might more than likely, be more amenable to those terms that would help the bottom line of the organization as opposed to helping the individual staff. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think if we bring it back all the time to being able to provide better services to victims at the end of the day, that's one bargaining chip you can use. Okay. My next question is to Léonce. Léonce, your question is, what if your colleagues are the ones who give you the most stress?
Yeah, this is very common. The most important thing is to normalize the issue because interpersonal stress at work is very common. Even in helping professions like ours, it is important to encourage direct but respectful communication, clarifying expectations. It is also important to set boundaries and use the supervision as a remediation way if it got out of hands. Because the organization itself has obligation to actually mitigate such issues if there's a staff member who is causing stress to other staff members beyond the normal interpersonal issues. So really, the stress from colleagues is often about system pressures. For example, if you have a big caseload, you're going to see, you're going to perceive or see some stress from colleagues, but not necessarily individual failings. So that's what I would say about this issue.
Thank you. I like the word that you use about being in helping professions and how it's assumed that everyone in a helping profession is just a wonderful person. But everyone can succumb to the pressures and challenges of working in this industry and just everyday life. Okay, the next question is for Carmen. Carmen, your question is, my center is operating in the middle of an active conflict. How can I help my staff when they are also active victims of the ongoing conflict and are also in need of food and shelter and safety, just like their clients?
Yes, that is actually a great question. We experienced that in Lebanon during the war that happened last year, and a lot of the staff were either too distressed or they lost their homes. A lot of them really experienced a lot of miseries, yet a lot of them were also supporting people on. But I believe that what Restart did was very impactful because they did not force anybody to be on the field. If you're emotionally not ready to support others, it's fine. They were very understanding. And at the same time, we were doing group support sessions online because there were people who were displaced. So we were all in different areas. So we were doing these very frequently, and they were very helpful because it made us realize that we are not alone feeling this way. And also, Restart reached out to the IRCT because many of us really needed, whether individual or group PSS sessions. And we felt like we needed somebody who's not within this context, somebody who's not experiencing all of this suffering that many of us were experiencing at the time. So the IRCT was kind enough to link us with some other member centers or individuals who were providing us with these online sessions. So that was also quite helpful. And usually when there's a crisis, there's more work to be done. And but at the same time, the management was very understanding, especially for those residing in the city where most of the conflict was happening, if work was not done at the same pace that it was done before. So being flexible, understanding, and providing whether individual or group support sessions is what's needed.
Thank you. That's such a great answer. I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience or anyone attending who's also had to work in the middle of a conflict zone who has any input. Feel free to raise your hand or just give a shout. In the meantime, we have another question for Léonce. Léonce, your question is desensitivity commendable in practice in order to protect mental health, or it affects patient outcomes? And maybe you can explain to those of us who aren't psychologists what desensitivity is to start off with.
Thank you so much. This is something that comes up a lot in terms of people saying we want to protect ourselves as providers in a way that we're not affected by the stories of our clients. It is very important to distinguish between healthy professional boundaries, which is very, very important to have, and emotional numbing. Emotional numbing is where you actually become emotionally unavailable, unaffected, really emotionally you're not there when you're hearing the client's story. So healthy professional boundaries, absolutely. Emotional numbing, not recommended. Emotional regulation is very healthy, but indifference is not. Indifference is not healthy, is not recommended, but emotional regulation, really, really recommended to make sure you're protecting yourselves to be able to help others. Desensitization may protect clinicians short term, but it risks compassion fatigue and missed cues in clients, because when you're emotionally numb, you might miss cues in client stories, what the clients are, the stories that are telling you what's happened to them. So you might miss a lot of cues. And what I always recommend, the best approach is to balance empathy with self-care practices. Empathy has to be there as a professional in helping jobs, professions. It has to go with self-care practices, which includes healthy professional boundaries, which includes supervision. There's a lot that can be really addressed during supervision with your supervisor, mindfulness, and really with peer debriefing. Thank you.
Thank you. Great answer. Kanayo, I feel like I have a lot on my shoulders with my staff relying on me for salaries during a time where there are funding cuts, etc. I have to let go of some staff members. How can I keep from losing my mind?
To be honest, that's a very valid concern for anyone who works in this space and have the responsibility of paying salaries, because like we know, there's so much funding. The funding space has shrunk significantly and the work remains enormous or even seems to be growing. But the truth is that one thing I find is that people appreciate honesty, especially if you have a track record of being a very hands-on leader or employer. People would appreciate you explaining to them what you're going through as opposed to stringing them on. Now, I also think it would be better for you to tell people at the beginning of the month or whenever that, listen, we're not able to, we can't go on, we're not able to pay salaries, this is the situation, and let go of them, or maybe put them on a temporary basis, as opposed to having them come to work every day and at the end of the month you have nothing to pay them and they've used up monies that they would have used for other stuff to come to work. She said, or I don't know if it's a she or he mentioned how she can or how they can maintain their sanity, something to that effect. You just need to find peace within yourself and realize that you're not letting go of them because you don't like them. I know that this will be very difficult, especially when you've worked with people for a while, you've been through things together, maybe they've even become part of your family, as it were. It would be difficult, but you have to find peace within yourself and know that it doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, the reverse is the case. The fact that you feel like this and you're trying to, you're grappling with this in the way your text, your words come out, speaks to me, that it speaks volumes to me. It makes me believe that you actually have a good soul, but you're doing what you need to do. I have a friend who woke up one day, she had lots of funding from America, millions of dollars, and she had to let go of 50 people because the funding was cut effective immediately. It was hard, but she had to do it because what was she supposed to do? She had honest yet difficult conversation with her staff, and she did the needful. And I think that's what I would advise. It doesn't make you a bad person in any way, shape, or form. You're just doing what you need to do. Just be honest about it.
Thank you, Kanayo. And we're really glad to have you on the panel today because you speaking to us from the point of a director, of a manager, of leadership of these centers, which are very hard to run. So you can speak to us as a leader, but then people can also ask questions that they would love to ask their leaders, but are perhaps too afraid to do so. Like the one in the chat says, sorry, I'm going off script a little bit. It says, how can I manage to work with a boss who is a stressor and cannot even listen to other colleagues who are at the same level with him? And this is from Baker from ACTV in the chat.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, to be honest, one of the things we constantly talk about in LGCF is the importance of having a healthy environment, a toxic-free environment. And I don't really know how, it beats me. I don't really know how somebody who's the boss or who's the director creates an environment that is not enabling to make sure that that their staff perform very well. How you can handle it. Again, I go back to the first question you asked. You need to have allies. No matter how difficult you are, at some point, the boss will realize that I can't run this establishment myself. I'm not saying go into some trade unionism, build up some rancor. That's not what I'm saying. But build some allies, probably maybe in the HR section. One of the things that has worked for me is sometimes I might not understand what the needs are, but once my HR manager is able to explain to me, this is the way staff are feeling, this is that. I want my staff to work in a relatively comfortable environment. I want them to be able to work in a toxic-free environment. So it's probably easier when she presents it to me as opposed to, somebody I don't fully understand. So again, I would say find an ally, probably in the HR, find one or two allies and present it. Language is also very important. Depending on who you're dealing with, present it in a way you think they would be able to accept it. Yeah.
Thank you. I see a lot of clapping emojis. I don't know if everyone else can see them or it's just me, but yeah. Carmen, when I get flashbacks in my mind of a traumatic incident I have experienced secondhand or heard about, how can I stop my brain from replaying these disturbing flashbacks?
All right, that's actually a great question because it happens a lot with people who work with, especially torture survivors. And I think one helpful technique is to use the grounding. I mean, there are many grounding techniques that one can use, but a helpful one would be the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. So you try to find basically five things you see, 4 things you touch, three things you hear, 2 things you smell, one thing you can taste. So it's just engaging the five senses, getting you back in the here and now. It helps because in a flashback, you're no longer in the here and now. And there are, of course, other techniques, trying to press your feet into the floor. That's also helpful. And but of course, sometimes all of this might not work. So also talking to your supervisor can help. You might need a few days off, you need a short break, they're very normal. But if none of these work, it might be important to consider seeking professional help because sometimes it can be so traumatic that you need to do some more of trauma processing for that.
Thank you so much. Léonce. Okay, this is a bit of a long one. It says, some of my staff members are survivors. You wouldn't be able to tell, and this was not a factor in the hiring process. In fact, it is normal for staff to be targeted when assisting torture survivors. That they were also once victims came up a year after employment. They haven't said they needed it, but are there any special measures when it comes to caring for them as staff compared to my other staff members? What should I look out for?
Thank you so much. This is a really, really great question. Many organizations will resist hiring survivors as staff or as volunteers. And when I arrived at CVT in 2022, we ran into the same question. And we actually put together guidelines that encourage hiring survivors as staff and as volunteers. If anyone wants some materials on that, I can share. But in general, it is very important to recognize resilience because most of the time when we talk about torture survivors, we talk about vulnerabilities, but it is also important to equally consider resilience. Many survivor staff bring unique strength. I don't think there is a need to screen who is a survivor, who is not during the hiring process. However, it is very important to monitor signs of re-traumatization because this is a common occurrence among survivors. Whether they are working for you or not, there's going to be re-traumatization at some point. It is possible. So it is important to monitor for triggers, avoidance, and fatigue. It is important to, once you know that staff member or volunteer is a torture survivor, to offer optional peer support if needed, if requested. The trauma-informed supervision, that's something that everyone should be able to offer, both for survivor staff or non-survivor staff, and flexible wellness options. Also, it's really, really important to consider building organizational culture where disclosure is safe, but never required, where a staff member will come, someone will come and ask for a job, go through the interviews, if they qualify, whether they're a survivor or not, to give them that openness to say, hey, if you're a survivor and going through a hard time as a staff member or volunteer, disclosure is very safe, but not required. So that it is safe, not required, because if you need support, we're going to offer support through peer support, through organizational flexibility. So these are things that are encouraged, but really survivors bring a lot as staff members, volunteers, and advisors. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another question for you. It says, My client who I was seeing for many months was killed last month. I can't stop thinking about her, and I am so scared of losing another client. So less of a question, but if you have a comment for that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Coping with the loss of a client who was killed, I mean, this is very, very tough. But for especially those people working in the conflict areas, this is common. So it is very important to validate grief um, because losing a client is profound and personal. As we said before, being emotional numb is not recommended, not a good thing. So this will affect you. It is important to encourage rituals at work. If you lost a client to conflict or something else, it's important to, for example, include some moments of silence, peer debrief about this particular case. Is you have to normalize intrusive thoughts. As you're going to be working with other clients, going through your normal life, you're going to have intrusive thoughts. It is important to normalize them. That's part of grief, and it's not a weakness. So do not blame yourself on that one. The supervisory support is also very important. And sometimes grief counseling can be really, really helpful in this particular case. So that's what I can say about it. But this is really common for conflict areas, and it's important to normalize this. It's not a weakness to feel the grief, and you have to normalize, seek help if needed. Thank you.
I keep being tempted to like take notes and like write down normalized rituals in these cases and everything. And then I remember, thank goodness it's being recorded because I definitely want to watch it back. There's so much wisdom just flowing today. Kanayo, this is another one for you. It says, how can I encourage staff care in my organization if staff do not want to spend time together? They don't like each other. And then a similar question is also, as a manager, how do I solve the problem of a difficult department in which there is a lot of infighting and colluding?
So I'll start by saying that every organization has a culture. The culture would usually start from the head of the organization or the management level and snowball into the other, to every other person in the organization. And the onus is on the leadership of the organization to create and maintain that culture. A culture of one thing we constantly do I constantly say in LGCF is that we spend most of our waking hours at work. You literally go home, have a meal, maybe watch a movie and go to bed. So most of your waking hours, you're at work. So it's very, very important that we create an environment where, everybody feels safe and it's a good community. So it would start from you, the boss of the organization, the management of the organization. What do they see you demonstrate? One of the things we also encourage, for instance, every quarter we have what we call a team bonding exercise, where people go out, they have meals, they play games, they just relax outside the working environment. What that does is that it helps them create an environment and learn themselves outside the pressure of work. So they probably see that side of themselves that they haven't seen in the working environment because of all the pressure. I see all my people giving me thumbs up. In the pressure of all the working environment, the pressure that the working environment will not let them have. What it does is that sometimes I even see that they go out on their own. It has nothing to do with the organization. They go out and they organize things themselves. And by the way, they don't invite me, but that's talk for another day. They go out and but it's something that I have encouraged. We have Monday meetings. Every Monday we have a meeting. And in the meetings, we talk about the week before, and we strategize about the week ahead. And in those meetings, I'll usually have a 5 minute talk. I could be talking about resilience. I could talk about the importance of reading a book. Sometimes I could talk about the importance of not having a toxic environment. But in those meetings, we also have AOB, where I suppose because we're not a very big organization, we're at under 15. So it's, I make sure that at those meetings, I talk about the importance of having, a beautiful community. And I see it happening. I talk about the importance of, people just being comfortable and people just being able to relate to other people. And finally, before I end this, I also think that it would help what you demonstrate. I'm very, very big in Nigeria, Nigerian work culture. It's not accepted, but it's normal for people to talk to their staff in a very derogatory way. I don't condone it. So I speak to my staff in a very respectful way, and I insist that everybody is very respectful. So bottom line is that it has to start from the top, and it snowballs to every other member of staff. So it's the onus is on the leaders to build and maintain that culture. And I can't even overemphasize the importance of having a toxic-free environment to have people working, and the importance of staff being able to relate to themselves. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. A somewhat related question for Carmen, but from the other side. It says, what do I do if I feel I am being bullied at work? And then a Spanish submission. I won't attempt to read it in Spanish, but in English it says, how can we mitigate bullying behavior in a team that is worn out and doesn't recognize that it is engaging in this type of behavior?
All right. I mean, that's a great question because many times bullying happens because the person is burnt out themselves. So it's important to kind of understand maybe how things are working in this context. So maybe instead of accusing the person directly, you can simply mention it as an observation. Like, I'm noticing that you're maybe being a bit more reactive than usual. Um, so yeah, mentioning it as an observation. But if this keeps on repeating itself, and if it's coming only from that same exact person, and that person is not responding well to your noted observation, then of course it's important to consider maybe voicing it to the HR because it goes against the work policies. Um, but if it's a thing that's happening, among everyone in the team, everyone is bullying each other, then no, there is something bigger that should be happening on the organizational level. Maybe some more team bonding activities, something that would create a better team culture and where people might feel a bit less burnt out, which therefore can let them maybe bully each other less.
Thank you. It sounds like HR is a very important department to have in organizations, or some form of something that is a bit detached from the leadership. Léonce, in low resource settings, how can we boost healthcare workers' morale when the cases they deal in are inhumane, frightening, and demoralizing?
Thank you so much. This is a very tough question. In those situations, I mean, I did work in this kind of similar situation when I was back in Rwanda, back in DRC. It is very important to recognize and celebrate small wins. Just the small wins, it has to be celebrated as much as possible. It does not have to be, someone who was psychotic, feeling better. And, it's really small wins. So that really helps. It can be a client's progress, a staff innovation. When you can celebrate that, it really helps with boosting the morale. It's important to rotate assignments to reduce overexposure to most distressing cases. It is possible. Some of you have, different staff members, you have to assign cases. Sometimes you will see someone has the big, the toughest cases, and someone has the easiest cases. So that can really that can affect one staff members versus another. So it's important to assign and rotate, different, stressful cases to different people so that they can really bear the burden as a team. Peer recognition, as Kanayo said, as a manager, it is very important to recognize those small wins to staff members and between staff members, peer recognition. That really helps. Even low gestures like public acknowledgement, it really helps make the staff feel like they're really making a progress, even for small wins. It is very also, that's probably where having like RRCT and having a network is good to strengthen connections with global networks for solidarity, because we've seen cases also of that solidarities where organization in really, low resources can get some support even remotely, to really boost their morale, but also their resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question for you is, this sounds rather specific. It says, what can be done to reduce substance and alcohol abuse amongst healthcare workers?
That's a tough one again. One, that can be a sign of burnout. So it is very good to normalize conversations about stress and coping. It is also important to reduce stigma around asking for help, because in some cases, people are afraid to tell you as a manager what's going on because they know they're going to be stigmatized. So it is important to provide confidential employee assistance programs. Like here in the US, we have access to those programs where a staff member can receive employee assistance programs or counseling anonymously. I know this is not possible for all the centers, because of the means, but people actually can get help either for alcohol abuse or other substance abuse that they're going through because of their work. It is also important to encourage healthy coping. They're really good coping skills and measures that can be put in place, like exercise groups, mindfulness, and peer support, peer check-ins that could help with. And then one of the big one is to really change systems, because most of the time, if your staff member is going through this, it's also maybe it's because of the system. Maybe they have a big caseload. Maybe they have only difficult cases compared to others. So it's also important to look at not the staff member themselves, but also the organization and the system. Thank you.
Linda, I think you're muted.
I am muted. Thank you. Okay, Kanayo, this question's for you. It says, I think self-care is selfish, especially to spend any money to use on staff instead of to use on actual torture victims. I guess it's less of a question, but do you have a comment for this comment?
I certainly do. First off, when Lisa was doing her opening remarks, she twice or thrice she made reference to the phrase vicarious trauma. It's a real thing. I believe that anybody who's working with torture survivors is a potential torture survivor just because of vicarious trauma. A lot of times you ingest a lot of this trauma, and if you don't have a healthy way of expelling it, you become traumatized yourself and you're no good to anybody. And so saying that self-care is a waste of money that can be used to help survivors is akin to saying that servicing your car is a waste of money. That car will break down one day and you would have no use for it. So in the best interest of the organization, in the interest of the people we serve, self-care it's not negotiable, it's a non-negotiable. It's very important that we prioritize that, because like I said, everybody who works with survival is a potential survivor.
Thank you for that. Carmen, your question, it says, what self-care practices have been found most effective in managing stress and preventing burnout? This is from Abdullahi from Sora. And then also a similar question is, how do I know when I am burning out and what can I do about this? I am feeling so tired and low motivation lately, but I cannot lower my workload or take time off.
All right. I think that's a question that everybody can relate to. There are many practices that one can do as part of the self-care, but a lot of us think self-care is all about going to spas and traveling and, doing things that you cannot do every day, which is not. So it's really about having a daily routine in life. That daily routine involves trying to say no, trying to have a 1 hour lunch break if you can, trying to do the simple things that a lot of us totally ignore. It's important to also know what is urgent, because a lot of the time in the NGO world, everything is categorized as urgent. So really ask yourself, is it urgent? Is anyone dying? How urgent? If it waits till tomorrow during working hours, would that be okay? Of course, there's a certain way to express that towards your colleagues or supervisor. And a lot of times you would realize that it can wait till tomorrow. So this is, I think, the first step that should be. And of course, there are other things that one can try to do after working. It's trying to do something to totally disconnect. It can be cooking at home. It can be, for me, it's boxing, for example, or doing Pilates. It can be so many things. And I don't know if you, as participants, if you can write in the chat things that you do that actually helps you feel better, because it's really subjective and it depends on what each person likes to do usually.
Thank you for that answer. I thank you also, Léonce. I think you've written in the chat about that CVT as a tool, developed a tool to measure professional quality of life, including burnout. So this is great, to assess whether you are becoming burnt out, and you can share it with your colleagues as well. We'll also then go to you, back to you, Léonce. It says, what approaches can organizations implement to support the well-being of staff who primarily work remotely, and how can they ensure these employees continue to feel connected and engaged as part of the organization?
Thank you so much. This is a tough one. When I started this job 3 years ago, I was remote, and that is still the same. So really, really tough. It's very important to build intentional connection points. Weekly check-ins, peer groups. Recently, with my team, we just finished a step count, competition where we could do steps every day and compare who did more steps. That's for all our locations. So really staying connected in an intentional way. It is also very important to provide clear boundaries to discourage after hours messages, because some of us work on different time zones, and you can find yourself emailing people at 9 p.m. So that's really that would be against the well-being for remote staff. Also, if you can offer equal access to wellness benefits like therapy, workshops, it also helps those people who are working remotely. Use digital platforms that are available to offer some, rituals like birthdays, milestones, sharing good, success stories. But also leaders should, of course, model visibility and connection online. But again, when possible, to create those in-person, situation or opportunities. I remember when I was able to meet, many of my colleagues in different centers in Nairobi. It was, I felt the connection I haven't felt before. So it's always really good to create those opportunities as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question for you. It says, in my country, we get just as targeted for helping victims of torture. Last year, they raided our office and arrested me and some others, and I was tortured for some days before my organization lawyers got me out. Now I still do my work, but I am afraid.
Again, this is a tough one as well. I think it's important to also acknowledge courage. Again, I really acknowledge courage of those individuals working in such situations. To acknowledge courage and risk, because, for example, this question is not hypothetical; it's real. It's a real situation. Important to encourage safety protocol, because the more safe you are, the more you have those protocols and follow them, the more you will be able to help more people tomorrow and after tomorrow and the next month. So having some safety protocol despite the situations can really, really help. Again, to really balance that the courage and the risk. So if you can balance them with building in some safety protocols, it can be very helpful for you to stay safe and then help more people as needed. Psychological support, of course, is part of these measures, because the more dangerous situation you're in, the more psychologically you're going to be affected. Again, I will end by saying, to create advocacy alliances. It can help in the long term, not on the individual level, but if you have some advocacy alliances to help maybe bring whatever is happening to find a solution for whatever is happening, either the war or conflict situation, that can also help in the long term. And also it can make you feel that you have kind of a much bigger objective beyond helping the daily work that you're doing as a service provider.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Kanayo, your question says, when I give my staff money or time for self-care, they use it on other urgent needs like school fees and medical bills. How can I monitor that they are using the resources I give them for self-care instead of other things?
I'm not sure why I would give my staff money for self-care. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure why I would give my staff money. I don't think that's a good idea, because people always have, especially if you have maybe children, you would always have, situations or whatever that require money. And the temptation is that you would prioritize other people more than yourself, better than yourself. What I would suggest is, and that's what we do, there are little things that translate to self-care. For instance, I talked about the team bonding exercises we do in the organization. I didn't say this, but one thing we also do in the LGCF is everybody's birthday is celebrated. It might seem like little, but it's really a big deal. So every day when it's somebody's birthday, we have cake, we have drinks, and at the end of the day, we'll go into the conference room, there's music, they're singing, all those things. And it's at the expense of the organization. The individuals don't pay for it. And we prioritize those things even when we don't have funding, because I understand the importance of it. I'd rather spend money doing that because I see the result. I see, apart from the fact that it offers some sort of self-care for them, it also helps them to bond, as colleagues. So I'd rather prioritize that than give money. I don't really know money for what, to go to a spa or what. I'm not really sure. I don't think money is a good idea. I think you should, whatever it is you wanted them to do it, as opposed to giving them money, because, they would use the money for something else.
Okay. Does anyone maybe disagree about giving staff money for self-care?
If you're giving them a raise, it's a different ball game, but money for self-care, I personally wouldn't do that. So.
Okay. Okay. Okay, noted. Léonce, just because I know you have to leave us soon. It says, how do I remain empathetic to patients while simultaneously being detached in order to cope with the stress? I think you might have addressed this on the desensitivity question. Do you want me to go on to the next question, or do you have anything
please.
to add?
Yeah, because I've addressed this in the
Okay.
second question.
Yeah. Your question says, are there strategies to increase emotional robustness when dealing with difficult clinical scenarios?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the staff members, through supervision or other means that can come to me as really emotionally drained. One of the biggest challenges is feeling like they're not doing enough. So this is very, very big. This can affect people's emotional robustness. And one thing that I always advise is to really promote self-compassion and make sure that you forgive your limits. And if you forgive your limits, because if a client's coming in front of you, they have really tough, someone who have their, yeah. So
Unmuted her, sorry.
thank you. If you can forgive yourself about your limits, to know your limits about what you can do, what you cannot do with the client, that will help your emotional robustness. Because again, you're going to be able to celebrate those small wins, and you're going to feel emotionally able to continue what you're doing. You have to encourage the balance between rest, social connection, physical health. We've been talking about, the treadmill behind Kanayo. That's a very big tool in terms of staying emotionally stable, balancing work and other type of life like physical health and others. But also, it's very important to highlight the big vicarious resilience, focusing on clients' strength, because it is possible. You can choose to focus on the client's vulnerability, but you can also choose to focus on the client's strength. So once you do that, of course, recognize the vulnerability, but you're always going to find strength in your client. You're always going to find that. So if you can focus on that, that will actually give you the opportunity to do progress with the clients, with those small wins with your clients, and you're going to feel emotionally robust to continue what you're doing.
That's such a great answer. Thank you so much. I know you have to leave us soon, so thank you for your time and all the wisdom you've shared with us on the panel today. Carmen, the next question is for you. It says, how would you rate overall staff well-being at work? What resources could improve our work-life balance? / as a company, what are the resources available to help an employee in crisis? And also, are there any metrics or indicators that an organization can use to gauge staff well-being?
All
This
right.
is all about rating and monitoring.
Yeah. As Léonce actually mentioned, the CBT developed a tool called the ProQual measure, the professional quality of life, which we actually used at Restart at one point to assess the level of compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue, and so forth, and burnout. So this is one of the measures. Of course, there's also the MBI. There are some other measures that you can use. But I feel like there should be a system in place, a staff care or well-being system in an organization that encourages a work-life balance. One of the things that can be done similar to our organization is having maybe summer working hours. This is helpful, especially during summer. People want to, see their families. They want to go out, they want to spend more time maybe on the beach. So that's one of the things that can be done. Maybe having like a summer break, a 2-week vacation on top of the annual leaves that you can be getting. I'm aware that not all organizations maybe can do that. So maybe having some personal leaves or R&R can also help. Also trying to set boundaries even at work, like if everybody talks to each other after working hours, then there's a culture of not encouraging a work-life balance. So really trying to encourage the team to try to not talk about work or contact each other except if it's extremely urgent. So having these things in place is important. And many organizations actually, they have like a system in place where some team members who really need further support can benefit either from online or in-person sessions, like psychosocial support sessions and even psychotherapy sessions at times. And at Restart, we do offer these sessions to other organizations that have reached out to us and require such sessions for their team.
Thank you, Carmen. So to sum it up, there are some resources that you can use, such as the CBT ProQual tool and many others. Restart has a really good staff well-being manual as well. If you would like to be put in touch with an organization or resources that you can use in your own organization, please just send me an email and I'll be happy to put you in touch with Carmen or whatever organization has the tool that you can use. Yeah. Carmen, I will ask you your next question as well. If you could speak up a little bit because your voice is coming up a little bit muffled. But your question is, how do I separate my work life from my home life? how do I turn my mind off work when I get home? / how do you have work-life balance when work involves helping people in real need?
And
So once you get,
Carmen, if I might jump,
yeah,
maybe you can remove your headset because I think it's a question of your headset. Then we'll use the speaker from the microphone from your laptop.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, I think so.
Much better. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I think an important thing to do is try not to, have your laptop in front of you, because if you have your laptop in front of you, you're gonna work, honestly. So try to make it out of reach for you and try to fill your time with things that you actually enjoy doing. It can be literally watching something on Netflix or cooking or going out, grabbing a drink or coffee with some of your friends. Just do something. Just being bored will actually make you want to open your laptop and work. So yeah, what I usually do is I hide it, or I don't even bring the laptop with me home, my work laptop. So I try to not bring it home or I hide it. And also having two mobile numbers is actually helpful, like a work phone line and a personal number. So just look at your personal number after working hours as well.
Thank you so much for that. There are people also posting questions in the chat. There's one in Spanish if Berta wants to read it for us. But I'm going to also start encouraging people to turn on their mics and ask questions in these last 20 minutes. Now's your chance. But I'll also continue asking the prepared questions. Does anyone who understands Spanish, can they read the last question in the chat
Yeah,
from
so
Lorena?
yeah, she's asking Carmen, how is this instrument, this tool that she shared called? If we can write it in the chat. And I think she's referring to the ProQ Life scale from CBT, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
I
translated
will
in
share
many
it.
languages as well. So you can find it in different languages. It's available for free online.
In the
Perfect.
chats, you can find it under Léonce Byimana. He posted it with a link, if that's the one we're talking about. Is it? Léonce posted,
I
CBT has
think
developed a
so.
tool to measure professional quality of life, including burnout. And there's a link there. So all of you can find it there under Léonce's comment in your chat.
Okay. Kanayo, your question is, what are some signs that a colleague is not coping well and may need help or support? What can I do as a colleague within the bounds of what is professional and appropriate? / as a manager, how do I identify and help or assist an employee in crisis?
So there is no hard and fast answer to that. How you can tell that one person is not doing well would differ from how you can tell that somebody else is not doing well. First of all, it would be a function of what their personality type is. So if you had somebody who's normally very boisterous and gregarious and they suddenly come to work and they're mute, or they're barely saying anything, then you can definitely tell that there's something, something going on there. Whether you would reach out to them, I think it also goes back to what I said about the work culture and what is encouraged at work. Like I said earlier on, in our organization, we have Monday meetings, and I would usually have a 5-10 minutes pep talk about, could be anything, could be sleep, it could be whatever, resilience. And I think it was 3-4 weeks ago, because Nigeria is going through a really tough time now. Our rate of inflation is, we haven't seen anything like we are going through now, and it's tough for a lot of people. And so I just wanted to talk about that and encourage people to be present at work. And when I mean present is, be a safe place for people. Look out and see when somebody's struggling, and just to emphasize the importance of not making our environment toxic so that it's essentially a safe place for people. And somebody got up and said, oh, that she's very happy I said it, that the week prior, she was really struggling with something. And one of her colleagues noticed that she was struggling and reached out to her and talked to her, and it made her feel a lot better. And then somebody else just burst out in tears. She had a challenge and she had been struggling with, and she talked about it at the meeting. It was just, for me, it was such a beautiful thing because I just did what I would normally do, and people saw it as a safe space and were able to open up and talk about it. So it's down to what I said earlier on, one, creating a good work culture. It would always come from the management and snowball, creating a good work culture and just encouraging people, what you might call them, like team members, staff members, to relate and work in a very healthy environment. I think if you have that and people feel, and it's not just mouthing it is one thing to mouth it, anybody can say anything, but when they see you actually demonstrate what you say, because it's very easy for people to know that you're serious. This is a safe space. If I have a challenge, I can reach out to the person. I can reach out to somebody at work. I personally like to pride myself in the fact that I have an open door policy. So, I'm not a savior. I might not be able to help you, but just I would always listen to you, that's for sure. If I can help, I'm always happy to help. But if I can't, I might, we've had a situation where we had a team member who was in a toxic relationship with her partner, not even a husband, just a boyfriend, and it was a really toxic relationship, and she couldn't get herself out of it. So we got her somebody, to do therapy. We put her in therapy, so things like that. They're just always ways. But the important thing for that to happen, you must create an enabling environment. If people don't feel they have an enabling environment, if they don't feel that the workspace is safe, then nobody's going to tell you anything. Yeah.
That's great. And one of the highlights for me from what you said is when the first person talked about their problem, it encouraged someone else to be able to talk about theirs or to recognize that they're suffering from the same thing. So, yeah, thank you. Carmen, your question it's a little bit of a long one. It says, I have heard that it's important to feel your feelings, but I find that really overwhelming. I feel like if I start to feel what I really feel about the people we serve, I'll drown in the sadness and pain and grief and overwhelm. How do I feel these feelings for real and let them into my heart in small doses rather than just stuffing them down and trying to stay focused in my head?
That's actually a very brave question because it is very important to try to experience these feelings in small doses. And how do we do it in small doses? It's like, trying to turn on a faucet or opening a floodgate. It's important to try to turn it on gently. And what we should try to do is don't suppress things, don't bottle things up. Try to, talk about them to someone, whether to a colleague that you trust or to your supervisor or even to your spouse or to your friend. Like just to express or talk about how you're feeling. And it's okay to not always be okay, and it's okay to feel tired. It does not make you less empathetic, but if you keep on ignoring these feelings, you might become less empathetic. Not because you are not an empathetic person, but because your feelings are now more in control of you.
Thank you for that. I'll read something from the chat. I think it's pronounced Ka or K Ho Cheng from Malaysia. Do you want to put your mic on and
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was just reflecting and also responding to the question that we discussed at length earlier, and I'll just read out the comments. That I believe the paradigm of staff care for the organizations that are working towards anti-torture should start from the belief that we should care for another person who is working together with us towards the same vision like us. It's not because staff care is important and that's why we need to do that. And the responsibility lies, of course, with the leadership to build the culture, to throw the resource in and to set up the mechanism, the systems. But in reality, the care is actually done by all the staff, including the leaders as well. But it's those, how are you doing? And also it feels terrible today. And these are the care that actually being done by the staff. And I was just sharing this reflection. But thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so comforting to know from the secretariat level that there's so many of our centers have such great leaders who recognize the need to care for their staff, and that it leads to longevity, but it's not so much that, oh, it'll be great for the victims, which is true, but just caring about people on a human personal level is just what humanity is about, and that's what human rights is about. So this is great. So thank you. Kanayo, your question. How can I communicate to my manager and team that I'm not coping well and need support or time off? I don't want to seem incompetent. If you feel like this question is a repetitive, let me know and I'll go to the next question.
Well, to be honest, I've mentioned a lot of things I'm going to say are probably things I've said before, but let me just add one bit. What the person said, oh, that they don't want to look incompetent. You know, there are certain things you can't stick on people. If you have a track record of being competent, if you have a track record of being a valuable member of the staff, I don't believe that when you're going through a trying period, that anybody would say, oh, you know, they are being incompetent or they are being lazy. However, if you have a track record of just having a blasé attitude to things and you just never get work done anyway, then there's really no difference between when you're doing good and when you're not doing good. Yeah.
Thank you. That's actually
As an
very
addition
helpful.
to everything I've said earlier on about, you know, just reaching out to people.
Yeah. That's very helpful. I think it helps to give you courage if you know that you are a good member of staff and you do good work. If you know that for sure, then it's helpful in that it gives you courage to ask for help when you need it, because you're not, you've demonstrated your value. So that's encouraging. Still with you, Kanayo. This question is submitted in Spanish, but translated it says how to deal with violence in teams. And
Violence
in teams.
Well, we have and I suggest every organization should have that. We have a staff manual that tells you what you can and cannot do and what the consequences would be. Generally, violence would lead to dismissal. I mean, we would investigate, but violence in the workplace, thank God we've never had to deal with that. But violence in the workplace, I would say, is a no-no, because if you condone it the first time, it would spiral out of control. What you would inadvertently be saying it's okay, but violence is never okay. When Léonce was speaking earlier on, he talked about the importance of being emotionally regulated. You would have to be totally emotionally regulated to descend to violence. So LGCF in our policy, violence, terminal dismissal. That's yeah.
I think that's so important to know as well. I think we think of also violence of a big event that happens, but when I worked back in Zimbabwe at Counseling Services Unit, I was the safeguarding focal person. And when we went for the training of that, we learned that violence starts at the very smallest level, where some people wouldn't even call it violence, like harassment. Repetitively doing something that your colleague has asked you to stop, ignoring their requests, that's harassment, and it levels up. So like Kanayo said, having safeguarding policies, which the IRCT Secretariat is really trying to encourage our member centers to have. Not just safeguarding, it's not only about the clients that we serve, it's also to protect staff, so that there's also ways that staff can report their colleagues, so that you just feel safer at work and to discourage things like violence in teams. So thank you for that answer, Kanayo. Carmen, your question is, are there any tools or techniques to proactively prepare myself or reduce the impact of vicarious trauma ahead of my engagement with challenging situations?
It's important to keep in mind that, I mean, you can tell yourself, I'm going to listen carefully, but this story is not really mine to carry. So just the mere fact of you listening to that person and trying to support that person is really already a big step, because a lot of people are not listened to, and you are doing the best you can to support someone. You cannot save everyone. You cannot do more than that. I mean, I'm sure there's always something additional that you can be doing, but as a human, you cannot hold these stories and experience them yourself as if they're your own. So trying to, create this bubble in your head, like I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna empathize, but I will never fully be in your shoes because I'm not part of that event. So I think this mental state is important to have before engaging in trauma processing, for example, with a survivor. I'm not sure if you're talking to us, Linda.
Yeah, I think she's
Sorry.
muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Another question for you, Carmen, is it says, how can I overcome compassion fatigue?
I mean, I don't want to be redundant because I think it's similar to what we already discussed. But of course, it's important to make sure your battery does not run out completely, to continue to be, empathetic and to continue to feel the same type of motivation at work. So really, take breaks when you need to. Don't overdo it. Try to, be kind to yourself for you to not lose that motivation, to not lose that empathy when you work with survivors. If you're noticing yourself that you're not listening as actively as before, or you're trying to avoid certain clients or certain beneficiaries, I mean, then there's something wrong happening, and maybe you do need a break. Maybe you do need to talk to someone and take some time off. And it does not make you less competent if you ask for that support.
Thank you. A bit of a curveball for you, Kanayo, because this was submitted this morning. It says, what strategies can one use to maintain self-care when experiencing fear, particularly emotional distress and concern about possible retaliation, such as termination, or raising legitimate complaints about a supervisor in the workplace where alternative channels for reporting such concerns are either unavailable or not functioning properly?
Strategies to maintain self-care when you're experiencing fear, did you say?
Yes, strategies one can use to maintain self-care when experiencing fear, and there's no channel to report.
Do you know what? What I'm going to say is probably going to be really hard. It's very important that I know that in the world we live in where it's very difficult, jobs are really difficult to get by now. But I always say that I always think that you need to be alive and you need to be well physically, mentally to be able to do any form of job. And so if you work in an environment that is so toxic, because that sounds like a really toxic environment, if you work in an environment that is so toxic where your voice doesn't count, there's no reporting channel. Maybe the only person you're allowed to talk to is the person who you have a problem with. You have policies, but those policies are not. It's generally a very toxic environment. I would always say talk to somebody else, find an ally. That's always my first to go. And if all fails, honestly, as hard as it would be, sometimes people are better off being at home as opposed to being in certain environments that might even make you lose your mind. I mean, why would anybody go to work and be fear? That's such a strong word. Why would anybody go to work and be fearful? So 5 days a week, you're getting up in the morning, you're having palpitations, your anxiety kicks in, and before you know it, God forbid, you might even become psychotic because you have a job. There must be a point. I mean, talk to a family member, talk to somebody else, but there has to be a point where you would say enough already. And what that point would be is difficult because everything is context, right? I don't know the context of this, but there would be a point where you would get to, if there's nobody to talk to at work, talk to your family member. There has to be a point where you get to and you're like, enough already. I can't take any more of this. I've seen people that have actually lost it just because of work, work chaos. And at the end of the day, was it really worth it? No, it wasn't. So I would say do everything you can, but if nothing works, there will be a point where you will have to get up and go. Yeah.
Where you choose your own mental health.
Exactly, over everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Carmen. This one says, I feel really alone with the burnout and overwhelm I feel at work. I don't want to look like I'm not coping, so I mask how tough I find some of the work we do and some of the stories we hear. What are some safe ways I can be more vulnerable / authentic with how painful I find the harshness of the world without looking weak or having my colleagues or supervisors judge me? So this one does sound like we've answered it. So I'm gonna also throw you a curveball. It's something that was submitted this morning. It says, how can we support staff in the current climate of hostility, rising authoritarianism, global conflict, and far-right rhetoric around the world, demonizing those that we support in our services, and a significant portion of our staff? Staff are feeling exhausted and hopeless. Supporting staff well-being has always been a challenge in the sector, but right now it feels like an impossible task.
Yes, I can totally relate to that, Lindery, because, with all of the crises that are happening these days, you kind of feel like maybe some staff might feel like the work that they are doing is almost useless because it's not really making any changes to the world. It will not change the world, actually. That's the reality. But it's important to let the staff feel valued with what they are doing. So if they helped 3 individuals, 1 individual, or 500 people, whatever it is, let them feel valued because they have supported people. They have made an impact on 1 or 500 lives. It doesn't matter. They have impacted someone. And feeling their value and getting encouragement and motivation, maybe a bit more routinely than usual, is important during these times to always realize and remember, why am I doing this? Why am I even working in this organization? What brought me here? To go back to the basics and why did I come here? And what is my my purpose? What am I doing over here? Yes.
Thank you. And it's funny because the last question is, how do I find purpose in my work? And I remember the one time I was applying for a scholarship to study international development, and the man who was interviewing me, he was from the UK. He asked, what's the point of studying international development? We've been trying to develop Zimbabwe for many years with no change. And I said, if what I work as or what I do changes the life of even one person, just one person, it would have been worth it. And to answer that question, how I find purpose in my work, that would be my answer. I would love to know from our audience, maybe 3 people, what is the purpose in your work, or how do you find purpose in your work? And I am not afraid to call on names. I see Kadia to Jesse, your mic is already on. Would you like to answer this question? While she's thinking of an answer, I might ask Kaho, how do you find purpose in your work?
Okay. I guess it's similar to what you said earlier, where there are so many failures, but there are just someday, maybe after a few weeks, then this one small breakthrough. Maybe it's just a person got a job, or the person told me that I can finally go to work because of the exercise that you taught me. I think those are enough to fuel me through another week until I got another good news from maybe another patient.
Mm,
Yeah, so
thank
those
you.
are the purpose.
Sarah Lopez, how do you find purpose? If she is still thinking, my friend Michael Kamau, how do you find purpose in your work?
Thank you very much. How I find the purpose of my work is the meaning of the work I do. When I support survivors of torture and war trauma, and I feel them recovering, that's giving me what we call compassion satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Give me more energy even to wake up the next morning and go and serve others. And what you said about helping one person means a lot. I'll give a story of this young man, this young boy who was walking along the beach, and there were so many fish, which was actually not able to survive when the tides were going out and back. The fish was left actually along the shore, and this young boy was just collecting a fish, taking it back to the water. And old man asked the boy, "Why are you wasting your time picking these fish? Are you able to collect all the fish, take it back to the water?" The boy said, "No, Daddy, even if I save one, that fish will be able to procreate and have more fish. So even if you had one survivor, you have done your work and you have got certain of your work you're doing." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I love that analogy of saving just one fish. And it's so true. And I really enjoy being the project manager for K for Caregivers because one of the things I can do is connect centers and people in need with with other centers that can help. The help is coming from within. And if you'll allow me, I'm just going to share my screen so that I can show you a little bit of a presentation. I don't know what I'm sharing. Is that correct? No. Can you see this PowerPoint
Yeah, but maybe if you can do it full screen,
like
Lindy.
this?
Yeah, now you should go to display settings and say swap. Is there something saying swap? Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, great. So just to show you what Care for Caregivers has been doing in the past couple of months, these are the countries that have received Care for Caregivers support. It is Bangladesh, Kenya, Lebanon, Nigeria, Palestine, Albania, Hungary, Kosovo, Moldova, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Tajikistan, Turkey, Ukraine. And these are the countries that have given Care for Caregivers support. It is Denmark, Georgia, Germany, Kenya, Lebanon, Nepal, Palestine, South Africa, UK. So maybe I should not say the countries, I should say centers in these countries have received and given Care for Caregivers support. I hope that this time next year there'll be more green countries here, but I also wanted to highlight that a lot of the times donors believe or people believe that help will come from the global north in inverted commas to the global south. But if you look here, the global south is helping the global south as well. And we are receiving requests for help. And so I am asking those of you who can volunteer your time and expertise to let IRCT know by emailing me and just tell me, hey, my name is so-and-so from this center or this country. I speak these languages. If anyone needs external supervision, group counseling, advice, please contact me. We've done a lot of that already, but we're always needing more people to volunteer. And also, if you are a center that needs support in terms of virtual external supervision, counseling, advice, anything, please also contact me on this email address here, provided here. I'll go back to the slide of the countries that have received. So about 10 of these countries in this region have received caregiver support in the form of they have received grants from the IRCT, and part of those grants have included Care for Caregivers activities. And this is something we want to encourage. This is something I know the UNVVFT, which some of your centers receive grants from, also encourages that, yes, give us your rehabilitation activities that you want grants for, but also include a small percentage of the requested grant funding for your own staff. This is highly encouraged, and we want to continue to encourage it. And then finally, I want to remind everyone here that we did put out a couple of months ago a request for videos. We want to know how you are doing care for caregivers in your organizations. So we put out case examples for you to respond to. You can either film a short video, 2 to 3 minutes, talking about how you would help the staff member in this case example. You can choose out of 7 case examples, how you would identify and help them, or just talk about a care for caregiver activity that you do in your own centers. And we're going to put that in a library setting, sort of, on our website and on our YouTube and on Fabo, so that other centers can learn from you, because we are learning from each other. So I'm going to attempt to stop sharing, which I feel like I have not done.
Lindy, hold on, because Lorena is asking if you could put back the slide on the with the who wants to be voluntary.
Oh yeah, I can just write my email in the chat so that everyone has my email address. Right now, we have more requests for assistance than we have volunteers. So I really am asking, and it won't be a very heavy burden. It might be meeting with someone every 2 weeks for 3 months. Or you can just let us know what you can do. So I've included my email address in the chat. I want to take this time to really thank our panelists. Thank you, Kanayo. Thank you, Carmen, for giving of your time and your expertise and answering these really sometimes difficult but pertinent and important questions. Earlier this year, we had a Care for Caregivers webinar where we did explain things like burnout, compassion fatigue, and all that. But often people ask questions in a very different way. And so this has been a great opportunity for them to have their questions answered by professionals for free. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Berta has put up a poll. If you could just submit, answer the questions on the poll and submit, and that'll be great. Over to you, Berta, if you have anything in addition you'd like to say.
No, that was an excellent moderation, Lindy. And yeah, these are the 3 questions that we always ask at the end of webinars. So if you could answer them, as you can see, it's multiple choice, so it's easy to complete. And with that, I think we reached exactly, we're very punctual, Lindy. That was amazing.
Perfect timing.
Yes, and I can see a lot of positive feedback as well in the chat. But yeah, with that, and as Lindy said, she has inserted her email in the chat, so feel free to reach out as we continue to unfold this Care for Caregivers Plus project throughout the new strategy from 2026.
And very
sorry,
nice
Lisa, you want?
Just to say, very nice to have you all. And I think you're seeing this IRCC team, right? Beth and Lindy were working really closely together. Members stepping up, Kanayo and Léonce and Carmen really providing expertise. It's this safe space. I just think it's really fascinating to watch this happen. So it's here you can come if you need more help. It's here you can also come with your questions and your tough, right, challenges. We are trying to create this, professional space of solidarity that's global. It's super unique, this thing. So thanks very much for all of you who also answered with sincerity and provided those questions. They were really tough questions, great questions. I really felt like people had really thought about this. So thanks a lot to everyone. We hope you've gotten something out of the session. And soon you will be seeing on our website and through Fabo a whole new piece about care for caregivers that provides the tools, the background for this, and a lot of the work that's been going on. So take care until we see you next time. And our next webinar is planned for
23rd October.
23rd of October.
See you then. And it's going to be on it's going to be on healing, so different types of interventions that 3 member centers would like to share with all of you.
Interesting.
So yes,
Excellent.
see you in October. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, everyone. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you for the session. Bye bye.